Here in the forbidding waters of the North Atlantic, generations of Donegal fishermen have carved out a living for themselves and their families. This is a tale of love, loss, and man's age-old struggle with the sea. A struggle that has left a litany of disasters in its wake.
Fishing was a way of life here. There were always people being lost at sea, and people still went to sea. It was hard to take, but it was accepted.
I never gave in to the view that being at sea was romantic. It was a hard, dirty, dangerous job.
A job that claimed the lives of 16 men in 3 separate trawler disasters that have haunted these communities ever since.
With our nets and gear, we're fair on the wild and wasteful ocean.
For many communities dotted along the Donegal coastline, fishing was their lifeblood. With limited employment, the young men who grew up in this tiny corner of Ireland were destined for a life at sea.
Families couldn't afford to send people to third-level education at that particular time, and the natural thing was for them to go fishing. And a livelihood was good at that particular. It was good.
It was on a fair and a pleasant day.
Fishing that time, it was a natural thing for people here to go to, you know. Otherwise, you emigrated. There were good money to be made, you see, and that was the draw to everybody to go to fish.
The bunny shoals of herring.
But it wasn't just about the money. Fishing was the common bond between communities. In places like Killybegs and Burtonport, little else was talked about.
But 2 communities were very, very close, worked closely together, and everybody would have known one another, would have been familiar. Every name to one another was familiar.
The only people that I really knew were people, you know, who were fishing. So it was a big part of their lives, and it was a big social thing as well.
Lifelong friendships were forged on the trawlers. The money the men earned came ashore to the benefit of everyone.
At that time, there'd been over 30 boats fishing out of Burtonport, and they would have had about 6 men per boat. And you'd have this equivalent working ashore then to look after all that.
43.50, 43.60, 43.70.
It would have been a spin-off there, far and wide, down to the butchers, the shoe shops. All the money that went into them sort of businesses would have came from fishing. Unfortunately then you have the other side of it. It provides and it also takes away.
We're talking about the west coast of Ireland. You know, you head west and you're heading for America after that. It's a particularly rough spot. If you have the wind southwest, westerly or northwest, you just get a mountain of sea coming into there, and for any boat to take the shore in that particular region would find it very difficult to survive.
Southwest to south, 6 to gale 8, slowly veering northwest, 6 to gale 8, locally severe gale 9. Squally showers. Having
waited a number of days for the weather to break, the Burtonport trawler, the Evelyn Mari, set out to sea on the 7th of January 1975. A state-of-the-art vessel, launched just a year earlier, it carried a crew of 6 and was skippered by one of the most experienced fishermen in the region, father of 4, Paddy Bonner.
Oh, Paddy, he was a really nice person and very good-natured. A lot of our friends at the time were getting married, you know, people who were fishing, and they'd be getting married, and then somebody else's wedding would be coming up. And then he just said something, do you not think it's time that we went down the same road or something? Big deal. It was a very, very lonely life, really it was. They were away at sea a lot, and I was on my own a lot. And I used to be delighted if they went out, you know, when the weather got bad and they were in 2 days or something. I used to think, oh, great.
That night, aboard the Evelyn Mari, the fishing was good. But as she came perilously close to the treacherous reef off Rathlin O'Byrne Island, she was struck by a wave and smashed against the rocks. Skipper Paddy Bonner managed a last desperate message. "Mayday, Mayday, come quick, we're sinking fast." But the boat was split in two and plunged beneath the surface.
My brother came in the door, and two of my daughters, you know, they were children at the time, they ran out onto the corridor out of bed, you know, because, you know, they'd be sort of messing with him and everything, and he told them very crossly to get back into bed. And I said, God, you know, what's wrong with him? He's in a very bad mood. And he said, Paddy's boat's been lost. And I thought that meant that it was a way out of radar contact. So I said, well, I'm sure they'll find it. And he said to me, but it sank. And I said, oh, for God's sake. I said, a big boat like that wouldn't sink. And then he said, well, it went up in the rocks. So then I sort of believed it, you know.
Burtonport, 9 a.m. yesterday morning. The search for the missing crew members of the Evelyn Mari, which went down off Rathlin O'Byrne Island on Tuesday night with all 6 hands on board, goes on.
People weren't geared up for this. It was just unbelievable. And it was difficult to handle. Difficult for the families, difficult for the communities. It was a traumatic time for everybody.
That night, the sea claimed the lives of all 6 men on board. Only 2 bodies were ever recovered. Among those never found was the skipper, Paddy Bonner.
I used to hate funerals and things and everything, you know. And I used to say to him, oh, geez, I just hate funerals and I hate... And he used to say to me, oh, don't worry about me, Mary, I'll be buried at sea. That's what he used to say, you know. Yeah, that's true. I think that might be what he wanted. I really do. I remember getting the children and putting them all around the carry cot and taking a photograph of them and saying, I don't know, you know, I don't know how I'm going to manage, you know, but I sort of, this is what they're like now, and I don't really know how I'll cope, yeah. But you just do then, you know, you just, you have to.
Not knowing what really happened to Paddy, Mary Ellen struggled to come to terms with her loss. She was advised by her doctor to commit her feelings to a diary.
I wouldn't be very good at talking to people. I wouldn't be able to say how I felt to people. So I felt, you know, in the diary you could be honest because you were just being honest with the paper. August the 4th. Where is the fellow who used to live here? He's never coming back. He just isn't. Please, just once. He can't. He can't. He's drowned. Lost him. He used to smell of diesel, and I used to run my fingers through his hair. Sometimes his eyes were tired. I used to love to hear the door opening and him coming in.
The blessing of the fleet at Burtonport in County Donegal. 32 trawlers and 10 half-deckers were blessed by the Bishop of Raphoe, Dr. McNeely.
Life had to go on. The men turned once more to the sea to support their families. Amongst them was 22-year-old Micheál Coyle. He had just returned home from Scotland, eager to try his hand at fishing.
I was a very jolly, happy-go-lucky fella, you know. Like the world was just, You know, he was just young and everything was just moved along, you know. Like he played with the local GA team here and like that, you know, and he went out for a few jars and, you know, go to the dances and lenties.
Micheál was one of the 5-man crew on the Carraig Una, which left Burtonport on the 23rd of November 1976 on what was to be its final voyage.
He was only fishing there 2 months before the disaster happened.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Carraig Una's on the rocks, the Carraig Una's on the rocks. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Well, we've had a report this morning that a Burtonport trawler had gone up on the rocks at Bhriain Island. It has been confirmed that the boat is the Carraig Una, skipper and 4 of a crew.
When I got the phone call from Mallinhead radio station that night to say that the Carraig Una was lost, the same spot as Evelyn Mari, I couldn't take it on board. I thought I was having a dream or a nightmare, and it's just unbelievable that something like that should happen.
In fact, Rathlin O'Byrne Island was notorious in the folklore of the area, and this latest disaster brought one prophecy in particular to mind.
The saint that was here, St. Asicus, said when he left the rock, he left the island here, that if it was ever uninhabited, that there would be 3 boats lost very close to the unhabitation of it. You must believe it now, there's 2 gone already.
I was working on a job and an aunt and uncle of mine came out to the job to tell me. I just knew there was something wrong, you know, but I thought it was one of my parents probably that was dead, you know. I never thought of somebody younger, you know, or somebody were in the family. They said where it happened, where the accident happened. I knew from the previous boat going down the Evelyn Mari, I knew that they were lost then.
The Carraig Una perished in circumstances eerily similar to those of the Evelyn Mari the year before. When word of the latest disaster reached the RTE newsroom, the story was picked up by filmmaker and Donegal native Joe Mulholland.
I had regretted not going up and making a film on the Evelyn Mari. When the Carraig Una happened, I just felt compelled to go and capture what was happening. Knowing that this was a tragedy and that was going to affect a community which I knew very, very badly.
Joe Mulholland and his film crew were there to record the dangerous conditions faced by rescue teams and locals taking part in the search.
The story of the Carraig Una is just the desperate attempt to find the bodies. They may have kept on hoping that there was somebody alive somewhere, but with the weather and the state of the sea, it was impossible for anybody to survive in that water.
During the search operation, one body was recovered, that of skipper Ted Carberry. Of Micheál and the other members of the Carraig Una crew, there was no sign.
I'd have been very sore on my parents now, and that they had no grave to attend. You know, it was, there were no mark to go to, you know. And that would have been the sorest part for everybody in the sense that there were no body got. The body being got would have been a great blessing for everybody concerned, you know.
After 2 weeks, with all hope lost, the difficult decision was made to call off the search.
Once you pull out and decide that nothing more can be done and you get your bits and pieces together and you leave for home, I think that's difficult for the relatives then at that stage. That can be the closure for the people that search on the shore or trying to recover the bodies, but it's never closure for the families.
Losing a person so suddenly and so young, you know, at that age, you know, it takes a long time to accept it, you know.
It robbed the community of several of their young men It had such a psychological effect then for others who had to go out night after night and fish and had to keep on doing it.
But for some families touched by the tragedies, it was too much to see their husbands, brothers and sons return to the sea.
I never would have fished then afterwards, you know. It'd be too much for my parents to be taken if I went to fish. I think they could never cope with worry of it after losing one, you know.
Many with little or no choice found the lure of the sea irresistible. Father of 9, skipper Francis Byrne, only knew one way to provide for his family.
This is Loreto skipper, Francis Byrne. He has radio contact with his partner in Girona. Other boats are using radio, and much of it is hard to follow.
When my father spoke, everybody stood up and listened. He had that aura around him that he was a leader. My father was away a lot fishing, but there were special times when you heard the key going into the door and turning, and he was home.
Like generations of Byrnes before him, 16-year-old Jimmy was destined to follow in his father's footsteps.
Jimmy idolised my father, as we all did. Jimmy was in that position where he let it be known that he wasn't going to continue school. I suppose mothers and parents alike would have been reluctant to let a 16-year-old go out to fish. But because Jimmy was with my father, it was extra security for my mother.
Francis Byrne had recently acquired a new trawler, the 128-foot Skifjord. On the 31st of October, Francis, Jimmy and 7 other crewmen sailed out of Killybegs.
Halloween was coming up, which we were pretty disappointed that my father was going to miss Halloween. Halloween was a great bit of fun around our house.
But in the early hours of the morning, disaster struck for the 3rd time. Battered by a sudden storm, this sturdy vessel, its steel hull smashed open, sank to the bottom of the ocean.
It was about 9:30 on a Saturday morning, which was unusual for the phone to ring in our house. It was a newspaper looking for information on the tragedy, which my mother had totally dismissed. 10 or 15 minutes later, the car door closing, which, say again, was unusual. And it was the local doctor and an aunt of ours. So it was then we knew that something was wrong. God only knows what was going through her head that morning. It was a lot to take on board. She broke down. It was pretty rough.
Yet another normal night's fishing had turned to catastrophe. Joseph Duffy, the skipper of the Skifjord's partner boat, witnessed everything.
The weather was bad and we just sheltered in Narrated till the morning. Then we're going to set out to go to fish with the daylight.
An almighty wave came and just pushed them in closer to the shore. They were wedged up on the reef.
And I was there within 10 minutes. Down and as close as possible to the boat that I could go. And there was a reef between me and him, and I just couldn't get in beside the boat.
The boat was hauled and took on water and went down pretty fast. I don't think they had much of a chance.
Miraculously, unlike the previous 2 disasters, this time there were 4 survivors. Jerry Lafferty, one of those who survived, recalls struggling in the freezing water.
There was 4 of us together at one stage. We had lost each other then. I made it to the shore and Standish was on the rocks before me. We climbed up on the rocks and we got into the house. The search party found us then in the morning.
Of the 5 missing, 2 bodies were recovered within hours. A third body was found a few days later and brought to the local morgue.
People can be very brave at times of tragedy as well, and can be very humble. And one of the persons who went into the morgue to identify the body was the father of the young lad that was missing. And unfortunately, it wasn't his son that was recovered, the body was recovered, but he came out of the morgue and he came to me, and I just said, sorry, you know, it's not your son. And he said, Jimmy, it doesn't really matter, it's somebody's son, that's the important thing.
In fact, it was Francis Byrne's son, 16-year-old Jimmy. The bodies of his father and one other crew member were never recovered.
My mother was left solely to provide for the rest of us, which was difficult on a widow's pension. Great faith carried her through, I've no doubt about that. I've often asked her, even up to a few weeks ago, I'm amazed how she done it. And she'll always tell you it was her faith.
"30 years on, the tragedy of the Carraig Una, the tragedy of the Evelyn Mari, the tragedy of the Skifjord, 3 trawlers in a row, this was a very big blow and will never be forgotten in that area.
You feel bitter that it happened, you know, and you feel sore for losing someone like that, and you feel sore that the bodies wasn't got, you know, and then you feel great for the support you get from the people. You know, you go through all the emotions really when a thing like that happens, you know.
You can see the pain etched in their face of what they've come through this last 30 years through tragedies on the sea.
3 trawler disasters, 16 men lost, all part of the grim cost of going to sea. After all these communities have suffered, the piers now lie desolate.
Oh, it'll be a very quiet place now, Burtonport, you know. There's very little activity in the harbour anymore. It's just, there's no industry left there anymore, you know, it's all gone.
Killybegs at the minute is nothing to what it was. We've got the finest boats sitting up on the pier there that aren't allowed to go out to fish due to quotas and one thing and another. It's a changed town, it's a changed area. Fishing has really died a death there.
All that's left now for this community are the vivid memories of the brave men who perished at sea.
Most of those memories will be of courage, fortitude, resilience. I mean, they all went back to sea again because fishing was the only thing we had for a livelihood.
It's in the blood. It's something that keeps pulling you back to the sea. There's a great love there for it, as well as a respect. There was also a great love. It was something that's all they knew was the sea and how to fish it.
Their names are etched in stone. Time would dim your memory on things, all right, but you definitely never forget it, that's for sure.
They were out there making a living. We all go to work every day, but we don't put our lives on the line like a fisherman does.
Paddy, on this Friday evening in September, I missed you. I knew that autumn leaves would fall and you would not be here. They are falling this evening, and it is no worse than I imagined it would be, yet it is no better. The hills are clad in hues of Paul Henry blues. The wind is rising and my heart is breaking.
And it's night and day we're faring. Come winter wave or winter gale, sweating our cold, growing up, growing old, or dying. Bonnie shore.